Hello, I'm Ruth Watkins, president of the University of Utah, and I'm really pleased that you could join me today for this 2020 announcement of the Ivory Prize. You're here in my dining room, and it's a pleasure to be able to greet you and to join in the announcement of this very special prize. The University of Utah is delighted to partner with Clark Ivory and Ivory Innovations to address one of our nation and our local community's most urgent problems, and that is housing affordability. The University of Utah is proud of its role as a flagship university, but just as proud of our role as the university for Utah. We believe in the power of the flagship university to solve urgent societal problems. We are a place of innovators, of entrepreneurs, of creative problem solvers. And it's just this kind of problem that we love to be part of solving. We are one of America's leading research universities. That means we're responsible for advancing knowledge and building strong relationships with our community. Since 1970, the U has launched some 230 companies. Our David Eccles School of Business is top 10 in terms of entrepreneurial education, and it is also home of the very first student-run venture fund. The University of Utah and Ivory Innovations are ideal partners. We are imaginative, we are creative, we are entrepreneurial, and we bring high quality. What an opportunity for us to lead and to work to solve big problems with big ideas. Our opportunity to partner with Ivory Innovations is truly remarkable. And it is this kind of partnership that gives us the opportunity to make a difference for Utah and our country. Now it's my pleasure to introduce the founder of the Ivory Prize and Ivory Innovations, good friend of the University of Utah, Clark Ivory. Clark?
Thank you, Ruth and Taylor Randall from the David Eccles School of Business. The University of Utah really has provided the perfect setting for Ivory Innovations. I'm Clark Ivory, and I'm happy to be here today talking with all of you about the Ivory Prize. I appreciate every single one of you who is here or throughout the country, joining us on this live stream, having the opportunity to see some of the great things in terms of housing innovation. And really, this is our second annual Ivory Prize, but we're doing it a little different this year, of course, for a very big reason. And we're glad that you could join us today. We think this is going to be a lot of fun, and we hope you will stay with us as we dig into the Ivory Prize and find out more about the amazing people behind those who have been nominated and who have been selected as our winners for this year's Ivory Prize. We were so excited this year in having a chance to look at 168 different companies and organizations that made application or who were nominated for the Ivory Prize. This group is absolutely energized and doing everything possible to make an impact on housing affordability. And this day at the Ivory Prize announcement, we're going to have a chance to showcase what we think are some of the very best ideas that are scalable and that can have an impact not only in the states where they're currently operating, but well beyond their borders, and have an enormous impact over time on how people are able to get their homes financed, how they're able to push through bureaucracies that make projects easier to develop and more efficient to develop. And of course, what we're going to do in the areas of construction and design that will allow us to deliver homes at a more efficient and sustainable level. So these are all great things, and we're looking forward to sharing them with you today. Now, let's just give a little bit of an overview to everyone about the exciting program that we have in store for everyone today. I'm super excited about it, even though this is a new format. In some ways, I think it's going to be better than ever. We have an opportunity to hear from my daughter, Abby Ivory, who's the director of Ivory Innovations at the University of Utah. We then are going to go straight to the winner announcement. And that's going to be super exciting because I've gotten to know these individuals that are running these companies. And I've got to tell you, they are something else. They are innovators, they are entrepreneurs, and they are afraid of nothing. And you're going to have a chance not only to hear who the winners are, but to see some amazing video clips of them in their businesses and seeing how they've made it happen. So that's going to be a lot of fun. And then we have the opportunity to hear from what I think is the most amazing and talented advisory board ever assembled in this space of housing affordability. These individuals, which Kent Colton will introduce later, are the experts in their field, in construction and design, in finance, and in regulatory reform. And they are evangelists and advocates for housing affordability everywhere they go. And while they don't have all the answers, none of us do, they've got a lot of great ideas, and they're going to share those with us. And we're going to have an opportunity to ask them questions and to learn from them. So I'm excited. I hope you are. Now I'm going to turn time over to Abby. Here you go, Abs.
We're so excited to talk about this second year of the Ivory Prize. We've had a lot of really great nominees come through. We actually had 168 nominees this year coming through from 32 different states. And right now we kind of want to talk a little bit about our top 10 group that came through this year. And they are all working tirelessly on solving this problem, even with a little bit of craziness that we have going on right now. And so we're just going to talk about these top 10 finalists. First, I want to talk about the finalists that came through in finance. And we had 4 finalists in finance this year in our top 10 because it was such a competitive category, and it continues to be. And I always love the finance nominees. And so our first one is Diggs, a company from Chicago, Illinois. And they are providing a financial platform that allows consumers to build wealth through their home. And so this is an educational product that allows renters to set and track savings goals leading up to buying their first home, or it allows existing homeowners to monitor their equity and optimize their mortgages so they can understand when to refinance, when the optimal time would be to refinance. Our second company in our top 10 for financial nominees is Rhino. And Rhino works with landlords to eliminate security deposits, and they replace them with a small monthly insurance payment. Our third financial nominee is Rock USA. And Rock USA is based in Concord, New Hampshire, and they are a nonprofit social venture that partners with homeowners in manufactured or mobile home communities who want to purchase and operate these communities and turn them into resident-owned communities, which is what ROC stands for. Our fourth and final financial nominee is a group called Isuzu out of New York. They are a digital platform that helps renters save and build credit. And the users report their rent payments, which increases their credit score, and they can also join online communities that help create accountability for savings. Our next category is construction and design. We had 3 nominees come through this category, the first one being Full Stack Modular, based in New York. They built the tallest modular building in the world. So what's really awesome about what they're doing is they're merging modular building with new construction technologies to bring a higher level of control to this modular building. Our second nominee in construction and design is Integra from Modesto, California, and they are implementing a fully integrated off-site building technique that streamlines panelization from permitting to assembly. So they're able to get a house framed in just a few days, and they put all that through their factory, provide customization, do everything. Our next and final nominee in construction and design is New Story Charity out of San Francisco, California. They are a Y Combinator-backed nonprofit that pioneers solutions to end global homelessness. And they create all these different tools that drive innovations, and they also look to identify best practices to share with other nonprofits, governments, and businesses that are working towards building communities for anyone who's in need of shelter. Our next category is policy and regulatory reform. The city of Minneapolis is one of our first nominees that I'll talk about in this top 10 group. And they were the first city to eliminate single family zoning. And so this allows, for an increase in density in these areas. They are also very focused on promoting transit-oriented development and inclusionary zoning and what they're doing. And so they have a plan called Minneapolis 2040, and it's really fabulous to see where they're taking that city. Our next group in the policy side is very similar to Minneapolis. It's 1,000 Friends of Oregon and the Housing Alliance, and they were nominated for the state of Oregon's passage of the House Bill 2001, which requires all Oregon cities with populations over 10,000 people to allow for duplexes on all residential lots on which a single family home is allowed. So cities over 25,000, have to allow triplexes, and it scales up from there. So essentially the entire state of Oregon also eliminated single family zoning, it's really fabulous to see that bipartisan support and the state coming together to work this hard on solving the issue of housing affordability. Our third and final nominee in the policy area is Symbiom out of San Francisco, and they're a computational law platform that mechanizes the rules and regulations of planning codes to help homeowners, design professionals, and planners determine if an ADU is allowed on their property. And so it's really a quick way to understand if you can build an accessory dwelling unit and build that density into your home. And they're working, with 9 cities across the state of California, but are quickly scaling. And we've really watched that scaling as we've gotten to know them, and they're growing quite rapidly. And it's a fabulous solution to, some of this backup that sometimes happens at city offices and everything else. They're able to really push those units through. We're really excited about our top 10 this year. They are doing fabulous things, and we are, wanting to do everything that we can to support them and anyone who is working really hard to solve this problem. If you have any questions or would like any connections, please feel free to reach out to me, Abby at ivoryinnovations.org. And now I'll kick it back over to Clark, and he can announce the winners.
Now it is my privilege and opportunity to introduce our first winner in construction and design. Jerry McCaughey of Modesto, California, and Integra.
Offsite construction goes back over 50 years in my family. My dad was a carpenter, started off basically roofing houses in Ireland, emigrated to New York, discovered wood frame homes which weren't being built in Ireland at that time, went back to Ireland in the early 60s and decided to go into home construction, building wooden frame homes. But when he went back and he decided to do it out of a factory. And that became effectively the first off-site factory ever in Ireland. I'm Jerry McCaughey, I'm CEO of Integra, and we are at Integra's headquarter plant in Modesto, California. There's a direct correlation between the cost of something and the lack of productivity. And so you've seen house prices become more unaffordable, and at the same time, which is somewhat blatantly obvious, productivity has also declined. So to us, it is quite clear that if you want to improve the affordability of housing in the United States, you have to increase the productivity. I mean, it's just economics 101. There's so little technology being utilized inside the construction industry, despite the fact that we're now in 2020. Yet today, they say it's the industry with the least digitization in it, and yet the technology exists to build the house before it's ever built, which is what we do.
So part of my task is to meet with the architects, engineers, the trades. I take that project and I look at all that information and I dial it back into the guys over in Ireland, and then they produce a full 3D model of that home.
So pretty much the model is designed at this stage.
We know where every nail is in it, we know where every stud is in it, we can tell you where every screw is, we can tell you the number of nails that are in it.
He's going to be able to watch the frame come together on the model itself, so if you want to take him through that, if you have any questions, obviously, we can take them through that at the same time.
That information that we produce the digital twin from produces a set of CAM files, computer-aided manufacturing files, that go to some of the most sophisticated manufacturing equipment in the world. That's literally cutting to tolerances that are down to the millimeter. We're making walls in the factory that work to a tolerance of 2 millimeters over 10 meters, which is basically a 16th of an inch over 33.5 feet. When we bring a house out to site and we take the average 2,500 square foot house, we're bringing that house to plate level every single time, every single day in 6 to 7 hours with 4 guys.
The industry for us, construction as we knew it, has changed with Integra in the sense that it's much more reliable when it comes to When we order a home, which is called a kit, that kit is going to show up on the day we ordered it, and it's going to be built in a day. What that's transpired into is that all of the other trade contractors that work behind Integra can now also count on that house being built on that given day and can schedule their manpower accordingly. So it's worked in our favor to be more efficient across the board. It's not just we got the house built in a day, it's much more than that. It's all the other trade contractors that are part of the team behind Integra being more efficient as well.
The most rewarding part of the process to me is watching the look on a builder's face who has used our product for the first time, and just seeing the total amazement that his house is actually up in one day. And it really, I mean, I love to be on site when we're delivering the first house to a new customer, just to see that look on their face.
Fantastic. I want to welcome Jerry McCaughey, the CEO of Integra. He has an amazing team, and I know there's just nothing more exciting than seeing a house go up in a day like you talked about. That's just phenomenal. How are you doing today, Jerry?
Very well. Can't complain. Delighted to be on.
Congratulations on being the construction and design winner of the Ivory Prize this year. We are so impressed with what you're accomplishing.
Thank you very much. I really could not be more delighted. I think it's a great honor for me, but also for the team here at Integra. It really is. I'm so excited about it.
It is a team effort, but I also recognize it's a family effort. And coming from a family business, I know that it's multi-generational. The progress you see made over time through generations really has an impact. That's what's beautiful about construction, is that so many of us are family businesses that grow and sustain themselves over generations and really do great things. So I love seeing that about you and your family.
Thank you very much. And I am my dad who's 84, who hopefully I'll get this video over to him. I mean, he's still around today with us, and I mean, he'll be so delighted and honored as well that 84 years, you know, on the planet, and after coming to the United States and then going back to Ireland, and then seeing his son and family members over here in the United States win an award for something that he started out from here, it's going to be an amazing thing for him as well.
That is exciting. Well, what you're bringing to, you know, the industry in terms of technology, efficiency, and the combination of quality and cost reduction is just really unparalleled, and we're excited to see this. I do have a couple of questions for you. You know, we're going through some challenging times. There's going to be a lot of young people that are going to be looking for work, and I really hope that they're going to look more and more to construction. This is one of the industries that just has got to continue even through some of these challenging times. And maybe you can talk to how we need to get more youth involved in the construction trades today, and some of your thoughts on that.
Yeah, I mean, I actually think that companies like ourselves are the key to getting young people to come into the industry. I mean, I think part of the problem is that the industry itself hasn't recognized that. I mean, I hate to say this about my colleagues, but in one sense, hasn't realized that the world has moved on. And if you now want to try and get a young millennial to come into this industry, if you don't excite them with the likes of technology, they're simply not going to come here. Gone are the days that they will look forward to the idea of going out onto a building site and simply swinging a hammer. That's not to say that that's not a meritorious job and they shouldn't be doing it. It's just a fact of life. These kids now have grown up with an iPad in one hand and an iPhone in the other, and they get excited about technology. I see it with my own 4 kids. So the idea of actually coming to work in construction, but work in high-tech, digitally advanced methodologies, I think that's what excites them. And certainly when you look around our company and you see the youth and the young people who are actually genuinely coming into the industry, I think that's really part of the secret, is we need to energize those young people again and show them that construction is modern, is advanced, and can be exciting.
It's true. It's true. And we need them, and they need the opportunity, truthfully. I think it's going to be the perfect marriage going forward. And I think we're going to see more and more of these young people getting engaged and getting involved, especially because of guys like you that are bringing them in. I wanted to move on and just sort of talk, you know, everyone wishes they had Integra right next door. I mean, I'd love to be able to call on you to, you know, bring me some homes right into my neighborhood, but it is something that requires proximity. And for the most part, those that are really doing an exceptional job are in the coastal areas where you've got the highest prices, and of course, that's where you have the greatest impact. How do you see modular construction and factory-built housing really having an impact on the entire country? How long is that going to take? What do you think?
Well, I mean, it's a difficult question to answer, but I could argue that it could happen faster than a lot of people think. And the reason why I say that is that in the last 2 years, 3 years alone since we entered the market, I mean, we've seen a dramatic change in the attitude of the large home builders to what we are doing. And to that extent, the ones that are using the system are now effectively all asking us, when can you bring this to our other markets? So to the extent that those same customers who are now becoming familiar with it in California are asking us to move to other markets, that's a very strong indication that they want to increase the use of it around the country. But it doesn't necessarily have to be us. I mean, there are, to be fair, there's some of my colleagues out there in the industry who maybe not as digitally advanced as we are, but nonetheless have a great infrastructure in place. And maybe with a little bit of help from those builders, telling them about some of the stuff that we're doing and the way we approach it might encourage them to move their businesses forward as well. And I think that is the key to it growing faster. I think people need to stop thinking about offsite construction in terms of components and panels. That's, to me, the strongest message that needs to come across. The biggest advantage we bring, and I'd say 80% of the advantage we bring, is before we ever cut a piece of timber or put a nail in a piece of timber, it's in that process improvement and that process change that we bring to the equation. And that's where the savings are. And I think those customers that we're supplying now have now fully realized that, and that's what they're looking to be brought to the rest of the country. And to the extent that they are now encouraging us, I think you could see this happen an awful lot faster than I think some people imagine. I think some people thought, well, we've seen this before and it's gone away. It's not going away this time. Really now, it's the question you asked is, how long will it take? And I think it could be faster than most people think.
That's exciting. Thank you, Jerry, and thank you to the entire Integra team for being innovators, entrepreneurs that are making it happen. It's that same kind of innovation and attitude that is going to help us through this next challenging phase of our economy. So we celebrate you, Jerry. We want to say thanks and congratulations again.
Well, thank you very much to everybody at the Ivory Innovation. We really couldn't be any more delighted. It's such a great honor to win, and I think for our team, I think they're absolutely going to be delighted with this. Thank you very much.
You bet. Now we would like to advance or talk about the winner in finance. We're going to turn to Rhino.
Our goal is really to help raise awareness and identify the many, many solutions that need to come together in order to impact change on housing affordability. And we represent one of those things. There's nothing more literal growing up in New York City than brick and mortar. And so I actually spent the last 8 years building buildings and managing residential rental properties. Really understanding it as a business and as the social good and need of providing housing for people is really, in hindsight, part of the mashup of what makes Rhino Rhino. Rhino came from the idea of really focusing on breaking down barriers. We provide an insurance program that reduces the upfront cost of housing by replacing a cash security deposit with a really cheap insurance policy. The way we propose to people to think about an idea so differently, really starting with the simplest form of just what a cash security deposit does. It protects an owner or property manager from something that may or may not happen in the future. If you think about that statement, that's really what insurance is by definition. Whatever life stage you're in, we want to be there to support you with Rhino.
My apartment is in the Ditmars Park section of Brooklyn. When it comes to security deposits that you have to put down when finding somewhere new, it can be really extremely hard. When I moved here, I had $0, zero savings, and had we not found Rhino, I would have moved back to Philadelphia because there was no option for me. For a lot of people, it's not just something that gets in the way, it can be what entirely separates you from finding your home in a new city.
When I hear statistics like 40% of Americans don't have $400 saved for an emergency. That's not for next month's rent, that's for an emergency. That's shocking.
When we ask for these tremendously high upfront move-in costs, we're asking people to lock up 3 or 4 or 5 times their life savings.
We pay like a really low monthly fee, smaller than my Spotify bill. So it's kind of easy to forget that it's even there. It really had just made all of the fears of finding a new place, it mitigated a lot of that for me.
We're about 55 people today based in New York City, in the Flatiron District, just around the corner. We have offices in Los Angeles and Dallas that are expanding.
I would describe Rhino's culture and team as dynamic but focused. Everyone's job impacts the mission and how much everyone feels that.
At Rhino, we think about housing affordability as one of the central issues facing the world today. It really is as important of a building block of society as things like healthcare, education.
Last fall at Rhino, we put out a public policy proposal. We called it the Renter Choice and Flexibility Plan. And the goal of that was to really stimulate conversation and dialogue. The Renter's Choice legislation that the city of Cincinnati, Ohio passed is an opportunity for legislative bodies to act and deliver opportunity to renters.
When a normal person thinks about startups and technology, it tends to be just about money, right? Making money and creating some outsized amount of wealth. I think I've very intentionally set our ambition considerably above that, which is not just about creating wealth, but actually also creating a really moralistic impact on society.
All right, well, now we get to welcome Parag Sarva, the CEO and co-founder of Rhino. So nice to be with you today.
Thank you for having me, Clark. I'm really excited to be here with you today.
You know, we're lucky that we were filming all this pre-COVID-19. Now we are sort of wondering how all of this relates to the rest of the world and what we're dealing with. And I guess my first question to you, Parag, is given what we're going through right now, how does what you're doing at Rhino, you know, what do you think about, what will the impact of it be in terms of moving forward?
Yeah, that's a great question, Clark, and obviously something that's filling nearly every hour of every day of my time at the moment. And you know, I think first of all, this is a terrible time for everyone across the world, and every type of business is severely impacted. And I think the one thing that we've sort of realized navigating the last few weeks is that the thing we do, helping folks find homes and feel a little bit more financially secure in that process, really has become even more important now than it was even as little as 3 or 4 weeks ago. And quite frankly, that's been a really strong sort of organizing mission for us to sort of double down and refocus on in the last few weeks. That's pulled our team together to really press forward, because in times of tremendous uncertainty that we have right now, everyone is feeling a little bit more pinched. And that's not just to say every single individual that's lost a job in the last several weeks, but everyone else is also feeling a little bit uncertain about what's happening going forward. And so we're finding really, a big need to help provide more education and step into, what we've been doing all along, but just even more so.
I was thinking about what you're doing, and I love the fact that you're putting more dollars in people's pockets right now who have to go out and rent because they're not going to have to come up with that big security deposit. Your product, I think, is really important going forward. You're in all 50 states. The question is, though, how are you going to get more traction so you can get more people to understand the availability of this? How are you going to expand this? What do you see happening?
Yeah, I think there's a few really important things about the way we've approached, our business or the sort of marketplace overall from day one, and more so than thinking about it as a product or a service we're selling. It really has been taking an approach about educating people in the marketplace. And I really think, we fundamentally do two things. One is we manage risk, right? We are an insurance company, and we think about, the policies we write and what the risks we're taking on as a result of that. But then the second piece is really about introducing this new concept to renters, landlords, property managers, real estate brokers, and everyone that's involved in the multi-billion-dollar real estate industry for apartments across the United States. And so from the very beginning, we started partnering with landlord trade associations, with landlords directly, to build awareness about how insurance like Rhino can really fundamentally solve the need for a security deposit better than just some cash sitting in an escrow account. And I think that has now kind of evolved into what the most recent iteration for us has been, is going one step beyond just the real estate participants, the landlords and the renters, and actually engaging local, city, state elected officials in that dialogue, and really sharing with them what we do at a program level and how we can together figure out new ways to attack housing affordability that is not just all about, ideas for the future or 100 years from now, but are things that are common sense solutions that we can implement today in cities and states across the country.
I love seeing that when finance comes together, has an impact on policy, and you're having an impact on policyholders. As you were talking, it made me think, maybe your insurance premiums are going to go up a little bit as a result of the instabilities right now. It'll be interesting to see, won't it?
Yeah, it absolutely will be interesting to see. I mean, I think this is an unprecedented time, in every regard. Anybody who tells you that they've modeled this scenario or planned for it, or have some strategy that is bulletproof for dealing with it is flat out lying. And I think, what we have been doing as a team is really just making every effort to look at every data point that's coming in and responding in as real time as possible. I think our approach for the business and for, myself in life is, you create the most value by delivering value to your customers. And for us, that's residents as well as landlords. And so that remains our North Star, even through, the pandemic that's unfolding in front of us. And so we will always, obviously try to keep ourselves above water, but try to do that in a way that continues to deliver outsized value to our customers. But you're right, pricing and all those things, we're figuring out in real time because we have to be realistic about, the world today.
I think that's what these innovations are all about, figuring out how to create value for home buyers, renters, everyone out there, because they need it so badly. So, hey, congratulations. What a fantastic thing. The winner in finance for the Ivory Prize. Parag, thanks for being with us. Now, we would like to announce the winner in our policy and regulatory reform area, Symbium.
My name is Layla Beni-Jamali. I'm the CEO and co-founder of Symbium. We're in San Francisco, California right now, right in the middle of downtown at Symbium HQ. Welcome to our offices. We launched out of Stanford about 2 years ago, and what we do is we build planning regulations right into beautiful, intuitive web applications so that anyone from a homeowner to a planner to a developer and architect can understand how the rules apply to their specific project. And we're starting with ADUs. ADUs are also known as second units or granny units, and they're pretty critical right now in the housing environment because of the major housing crisis we're having in California and all over the US. And what we think is going to happen is that ADUs are going to be one solution to the housing crisis to increase that housing supply at a low cost. And we're helping make that happen at Symbium. So this is Abhijit Mahapatra. He's our CTO and one of my co-founders, and he's in charge of all of the technical stuff and making the magic happen and building these web applications.
We've unlocked the secret of how we can communicate this legal code in a very easy, machine understandable manner. And that's how Symbium works.
My name is Kate Didich, and I'm the resident zonerd. So what I do is read all the zoning regulations and distill their logic into a form that Abhijit can encode.
And I'm P-Fan. Basically what I do is I get all the regulatory work that they do and translate that into a beautiful interface.
So the way we're trying to make housing affordability more accessible to the common man is we're trying to bring it to the web browser so that all they need to do is open the website, put in the address, draw their ADU, place it around the property, and that's it. That's how we want to streamline the whole process. We want to make it as simple as buying something on Amazon.
Right now, Symbium is working with about 9 different cities all across California. And what we tell them is if they're having any trouble at the planning counter or responding to non-discretionary questions about the planning rules and regulations, we tell them that we can streamline that for them.
From the perspective of homeowner, when the homeowner approaching us and inquiring about ADU, we should be able to answer them very quickly what could be built on their lot and what type of position and what they can really afford. That's where Symbian come to play. I mean, they help us to determine very, very quickly the eligibility of those lots, which bring a lot of value for us, but not less important, a lot of value for the homeowners, that they can know exactly what they are facing very, very quickly.
Can I build an ADU? How big does it have to be? Show me what the setbacks look like. And using Build from Symbian, they can actually visualize this right at the counter. And the best part of it is, our business model makes it accessible to all cities across the nation.
What we're trying to do there is, San Jose has this interesting requirement about backyard areas, and here we're trying to figure out how do we even formalize what does it mean to be a backyard?
Despite the power of our technology, despite the fact that we have a compelling business model and we have a really amazing growth trajectory on our side, the very best part of Symbian is actually our team. We have an incredibly talented team with diverse backgrounds that's pushing the envelope with what the future of planning is going to look like.
There's no off switch in this team, and they're all problem solvers. There's no problem that we can't solve.
All right, I'm excited to talk with Leila. Leila Balijamani, how are you doing today?
I'm doing great. How are you doing, Clark?
Fantastic. Hey, congratulations to you on being our winner.
Thanks. That's amazing news. That just makes my my month. That's awesome. Thank you so much.
It is exciting. You know, I love what you guys are doing. You have such an amazing team. And just like, you know, they said at the end of this thing, there's no solution you can't come up with. We're going to talk about that in a second. But I just love the way you are crushing inefficient bureaucracies. You are helping cities and municipalities across California, eventually across the US, figure out how they can more efficiently deliver to the consumer, their citizen who comes in and wants to build an ADU, or for that matter, do anything. Tell us a little bit about how this all works.
Yeah, sure. So we are a small team. We all met when we were at Stanford a couple of years ago, and working on a project that a technology that allows us to create really intuitive web applications out of complex laws and regulations. And we decided to start our technology to launch in the largest industry on the planet, and that's government. And within government, planning departments, because there's a lot of help that we can provide in that respect. Planning is the core of every city's activities. And so we took a problem within planning, which is the housing crisis, which is not just a California problem, it's a national one. But since we're here, we decided to start in California with the cities that are closest to us. And we have some amazing cities that we've partnered with, including San Francisco, who's our largest customer, City of Los Angeles, Redwood City, Pacifica, amazing cities, City of San Mateo County. So we're slowly growing, and we can't wait to bust out of California.
That's awesome. Well, I'm so happy that you picked housing as the first industry to really focus on, and we know that's going to have a big impact. As you said, housing affordability, there's so many different aspects to it. And I just can't wait until you get on to other things as part of your build program. I can't wait for us to be able to go in and instantly get a building permit or be able to file all that electronically and know in just a matter of minutes that we have our red lines back and that we can make our corrections and then go pick up the building permit tomorrow. It's going to be awesome.
Yeah, that's all coming, actually. I feel like you were maybe listening in on one of the meetings we had just this morning. But we definitely have that in the pipeline. So I can't say when it's going to be out, but we're working on that, and we have a pretty strong prototype.
I love the entrepreneurial and innovative juices you've got flowing there. And I want to just also ask what you guys are doing as you sort of adapt to help out through COVID-19. We were talking earlier about some of the things that you're doing there, again, because you know how to crush bureaucracies, help the end consumer do things more efficiently. Tell us how you're helping with the new SBA loans that are available to all small businesses under 500 employees.
Yeah, so as you know, the COVID-19 issue, the crisis is affecting everyone. Our largest consumer base, our largest user group at Symbian has always been homeowners and the general public. And of course, the apps we create are important to use by contractors, developers, and city planners. but there's a very large contingent of people who need a lot of help right now, and that's small business owners, individuals who've started businesses. And so we've decided to take our technology and build an app for the PPP so that people can apply and see exactly what they're eligible for, and then get connected to a bank that can help them. We should be launching that in the next week or so.
That's so cool. And as we found out, many small businesses are grappling with the complexities and difficulties of utilizing this payroll, protection program, and also the economic disaster loans that are available through the SBA. So I'm glad someone like you is just helping to streamline this. We need every business that can to go out and apply for that, and then to use that money to stimulate the economy by, number one, keeping people employed, and number two, continuing to invest in their business and doing things that will bring business going forward. So you're amazing, and I'm so excited for your team. Congratulations again on being our winner in the area of regulatory reform. You've really shined a light for us on an issue that needed to be much more efficient, and I hope every city in America is looking for the opportunity to explore your technology and see how it can make them more efficient, and again, crush the bureaucracy that keeps us from doing good things. Great cities will do great things with this. So thanks so much, Layla.
Thanks, Clark. I appreciate it. Yeah, we're going to get everything going again. We'd love to be part of that process. I'm actually sitting in downtown San Francisco right now. You can see it kind of looks like a ghost town, and that's not right. We've got to get this city back to what it was, and other cities as well. So we want to be part of the process, and we see this as an opportunity to do that.
Fabulous. Our best to you and Abhijit. We wish you the very best going forward.
Thanks, Clark.
The quality of our applicants this year was just amazing in every single category: construction and design, regulatory reform, and finance. And most of these applicants were private companies, entrepreneurs that were doing just amazing things. And we've recognized 3 incredible winners in all 3 categories. But this year, there were also some public sector applicants that were so outstanding that we really felt like we needed to shine a big, bright light on them because of what they've accomplished in the last year. And that's what brings us today to honoring what we're going to call the Public Sector Outstanding Achievement Award. And today we're going to recognize both the city of Minneapolis and the state of Oregon. And I'd like to welcome with us Andrea Brennan and Paul Mogish from Minneapolis, and also from Oregon, Allison McIntosh of the Housing Alliance, and Mary Kyle McCurdy of 1,000 Friends of Oregon. Good to see you today. We're excited to be here. I want to start off by just asking Paul in Minneapolis, what led you to this amazing comprehensive reform that you were able to push forward, and this effort that you were able to see materialize this year, Paul?
Well, Clark, it started actually with a mandate. Municipalities in the Twin Cities area where we are actually required by state statute to do comprehensive planning, and we have to do a comprehensive plan every 10 years. So 4 years ago now, we started this effort to do our decennial update to our comprehensive plan. And we decided as a city to do more than just checking the boxes and making sure we did everything we were required to do under statute. We really decided to take the moment to step back and decide amongst ourselves as a city government and as a community what we want for the future of our city. And through that journey, one of the things we started to do was to look backwards in our history and to learn together as planners and as policymakers and as the community about the history of racist housing policies in our country in general and how those played out locally in our city in Minneapolis. So we started educating people about redlining and about racially restrictive covenants and how single-family zoning played a part in that, in determining where people could live in our city, where people still can and cannot live in our city, and how that really affected outcomes in terms of disparities with income and homeownership and so on. And after that 3 years of talking with our community, it really became clear that there was some energy around making some big changes. And one of those big changes that we made was to put an end to that restrictive zoning that was part of that larger package almost 100 years ago of determining who can live where. So we put out a proposal to take all of our single family zoning in the city, which was about half the city, and allow up to 4 units on a property. We ended up changing it through the process to 3 units. And at the end of the day, at the end of this process, we, among a whole bunch of other changes, ended up eliminating single family zoning. And now anywhere that we had single family zoning, you can have up to 3 units on a property. And that is in place now, both in policy and in regulation as of the first of the year.
You know, that dramatically changes the landscape of zoning and of how many units are going to be built in your city. And of course, we're looking at the same thing in the state of Oregon today. But, you know, how is it being implemented, and are we seeing a real impact already? I want to turn to Andrea on this. You know, are you seeing this having an impact right now? And then maybe at the end of this, could you just elaborate on how much more important this might be as a result of what we're experiencing right now with COVID-19?
Sure. Well, a couple of things I want to just add is that while we approach this as land use policy is absolutely necessary and critical to achieving our goals in the Minneapolis 2040 plan, land use policy alone is not sufficient. So we are pairing this land use policy and regulation with other very targeted and strategic investments, additional policy, and really piloting new initiatives. A couple of examples: at the same time that Minneapolis 2040 became effective, what also became effective was new regulation on an inclusionary zoning policy, and the inclusionary zoning policy requires some affordability in developments of 20 or more units. So we see that as being an important sort of affordable housing overlay to the additional density and diversity that's allowed under Minneapolis 2040 and the land use regulation. We also, as part of this, made city land available, so folks could apply to actually do these kinds of developments on city land, which I think allowed for more developers to propose projects. So that's just something, you know, we don't have learnings from it yet, other than we were really surprised and very encouraged by the strong response that we receive from developers.
That's awesome. It sounds like you're really pushing this thing hard. You've got a lot of support and a lot of interest in the development community. As we go to Oregon now, I'm excited to just hear from Mary Kyle McCurdy on what they did in Oregon to really get momentum up there to change the landscape again of the way people look at zoning. And then after that, I'd love to hear from Allison just a little bit about how it's being implemented. So Mary Kyle.
Thank you. Cities across Oregon, like cities across the United States, have been experiencing for a decade at least housing availability and affordability crises. And in 2019, our legislature passed House Bill 2001, our middle housing bill. And that requires all cities over 10,000 in size to allow duplexes on every single family lot in a residential zone. And it requires all cities over 25,000 and all the cities in the metro Portland area to allow triplexes, fourplexes, cottage clusters, and townhomes somewhere in their single family residential areas. But how we got to that really took years of putting together the same sort of education that the Minneapolis representatives were describing, which is understanding the racial and economic exclusionary nature of our underlying residential zoning. And Oregon has had in place a comprehensive planning program for every city of any size since the mid-1970s, and that requires cities to provide housing zone to meet the needs of all Oregonians at economic level, diversity, type of housing, and location. And yet they weren't meeting that. Well over 60% of all the residential land in any city in Oregon of any size is zoned for detached single-family housing. And that's simply exclusionary from the get-go. So the Speaker of the Oregon House, Representative Tina Kotek, who has been doing one housing bill after another in successive legislative sessions for the past decade, spearheaded this effort. And she really put together a bipartisan subcommittee to help craft and refine the idea that she had for this middle housing, and as well as bringing in affordable housing providers, home builders, organizations like mine to help craft this bill. And it required her leadership, bipartisan support, because we had bipartisan opposition, and a wide variety in a coalition that came together to support it.
That's a Herculean effort to bring everyone together in that bipartisan way. I think you guys have done an amazing job. Go ahead then, and let's hear from Allison on how this is really being implemented. I know it's early on, but tell us what's happening. What are you doing to make sure that this really has an impact and that we don't wait several years before it has an impact?
Thank you. We're really excited to be in this place now where we've been in an implementation phase for the last 9 months. As Mary Kyle said, there's two categories of cities that were included in House Bill 2001. So cities between 10,000 and 25,000 will have 2 years from the passage of the bill to implement the changes, and cities inside the Portland metro area and over 25,000 will have another year after that to fully implement the changes. So for the last, I would say, 6 months, Mary Kyle and I and lots of other folks have been sitting through lots and lots of rules advisory committee meetings and technical advisory committee meetings. There's groups working on model code for cities to be able to implement. There's a group working on what the housing production strategies could be that cities could use. And all of this will result in cities fully implementing these changes in the next year to 2 years. So we're really excited. I think for affordable housing developers and advocates, we're particularly excited about seeing cities across the state implement these changes, particularly to your earlier question, in these times of COVID-19. We all know that housing stability is so important, and we're seeing that play out in all of our communities. And so to be able to implement this bill and to be able to create more housing for folks that need it is just really our top priority right now.
That's fantastic. And, you know, I think if you guys do a great job in Oregon and in Minneapolis of implementing this, and we can show people neighborhoods where there is a mix of densities thrown in there, there are duplexes, in some cases they're triplexes or whatever with these single family homes, and they look great and they work well, I mean, then the rest of us are going to have all the ammunition we need to go out and make sure that we can get these same kind of changes implemented across the U.S. Thank you all for being with us today. It's been amazing to hear from you, and I wish you the best in Minneapolis and Oregon. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much for this recognition. We really appreciate it.
Yes.
All right. Well, I think this is the opportunity for us to move forward. But before we do, I just want to thank the guys from Twig Media. You know, the Lee brothers have done a great job of putting together those little videos of each of the companies and then helping us string together so many people across the country on this Zoom format. I also want to thank Ashley Hadfield, who's worked right alongside Abby to get so much done. And one of the coolest things about this is that we've had so many students engaged at the University of Utah. We've had 8 interns that have worked just so hard to help us get to know 168 different companies. They've done a great job of helping us do more research and vetting out the whole process. We had 16 students in an innovation course taught by Danny Wall too, that were very engaged in the process and learned a lot about housing throughout this last semester. And everyone's contributed. We've got great young people contributing, but we also have an advisory board that is beyond what anything I could have ever imagined. And Kent Colton now is going to introduce them. First, I want to introduce Kent. What a great friend. And, you know, he's the guy that helped us pull a lot of this together. Of course, the former director of the National Home Builders Association. We've known Kent for a long time, and he is one of the best connected people in the housing industry. And he just connected us with all the right people on our advisory board, and now he has an opportunity to introduce them. Kent, let's hear from our advisory board. I'm very excited to hear from this panel.
Thank you so much, Clark, and certainly a great program so far, and a special thanks to you for founding the Ivory Prize. We wouldn't be here if it wasn't for you. As you said, we do have a superb advisory board, and I would love to introduce them now. I'm going to do it in alphabetical order. First, we have Carol Galanti. She is the I. Donald Turner Distinguished Professor in Affordable Housing and Urban Policy at the University of California, Berkeley, and the Faculty Director of the Turner Center for Housing Innovations. Hi, Carol.
Hi, Clark. Thank you for having me here, and thanks for Kent for doing this panel.
Great. Natalie Gochner is the director of the Kem C. Gardner Policy Institute and is the associate dean at the School of Business at the University of Utah. Natalie.
Hi, Kent. Thanks for having me on the panel today, and thanks, Clark Ivory, for putting this Ivory Prize on.
Lori Goodman is the director of the Housing Finance Policy Center at the Urban Institute and in Washington, D.C., and also is a vice president for housing policy at the Urban Institute. Lori.
Well, thank you very much for inviting me to be here today and for being a judge on this for this fabulous prize. Thank you.
Chris Herbert, managing director at the Harvard Joint Center for Housing Studies, and also teaches at the Harvard School of Design. Chris, good to have you.
Ken, it's great to be here. Clark, thanks for including me. It's been a wonderful experience. So exciting to see the winners today.
John McManus is the vice president and editorial director of the residential group at Hanley Wood. He has responsibility for a number of print and digital publications such as Builder Magazine and Affordable Housing Finance. John.
Honored to be with you all today. Congratulations to the Ivory Award winners. Looking forward to the panel, Ken. Thanks.
And last but not least, Ryan Smith is the director and professor of the School of Design and Construction at Washington State University and the founding partner of an enterprise focused on industrial construction called ModX. Ryan.
Thanks for having me. Thank you for having me. Looking forward to the panel.
That's great. Of course, Clark is a member of the advisory board as well, but we're just going to dive into this. What we're going to try to do today is to really focus on three topics. One, we are going to talk about the impact of COVID-19 on housing, and really not just the challenges because they're rich and many, but some of the solutions related to that. Second, some of you have submitted questions and we want to try to have a question and answer related to some of those questions. And then third, we'll have some concluding thoughts from the advisory board on the Ivory Prize overall. So let's dive into what's going on around us. This is obviously a confusing time. It's a time of serious disruption. Clark talked about uncertainty for housing. And we're going to talk about all those issues, but we really do want to also, as a advisory board panel, to focus on how we can adapt. What are the innovations that are needed and what are the solutions can come out of that? And so I want to start with you, Natalie. I know you've been working and very much involved in a blue ribbon response task force that the governor of Utah has put together to deal with this challenge. And I wonder if you could talk about the framework of that as it relates to housing, and then also any of the recommendations you have. Now, I have to remind our panelists that we love to talk, but we're going to all try to be brief today so that we can do it in a timely manner and finish in the next 25 minutes. So please, Natalie.
I'll be brief, Ken. I've been working on something, I'll hold it up here just to kind of show. It's called the Utah Leads Together Economic Plan. It's a recovery plan for our state. And I think the lessons learned that would be broadly applicable. Number one, it's so important at a time like this to have a plan. And it doesn't need to be perfect. If it's directionally correct, it will provide a structure for people to build from. Second thing that we've learned is in the plan, we introduce economic phases to our state. The idea that you have an urgent phase that we're in right now, that will move to a stabilization phase and ultimately a recovery phase. And this kind of structure has given businesses in our state, including home builders and realtors, the ability to think about the timing and how we're not always going to be in this urgent phase, and that indeed our adaptations and the fiscal stimulus and the things that we're doing to move past this crisis, the medical advances, will eventually get us to a better place. So these phases are very helpful. And then the third and last point I'll make is that we all know the value of testing and data to inform our decisions. And I think the other panelists and those listening will find it interesting that in the state of Utah, we will be launching what I'll call large-scale random field testing statewide to get a handle on what we need to know about this virus, so that as we move through these phases, we can have more of a dial, more of the ability to target public health measures where we know the virus is, not just people that are showing symptoms, but because of the random nature of our testing, we can see below the waterline in the proverbial iceberg and actually see what's going on in our public health environment. So you need a plan. Economic phases provide structure, and random testing can help with reactivating the economy. I'll turn it back to you, Kent.
Thanks, Natalie. And I really do like your phases, the urgent, the stabilization, and obviously with an eye on the recovery, because it will happen. Carol, I just read a paper that you wrote, very good, Lessons from the Great Recession for Today, Housing Aid Now. I wonder if you could share a few of your observations there, and especially if you can talk about the challenge for renters, and then that obviously involves landlords as well, and then homeowners, and that certainly oftentimes involved the lender in that process. So thank you.
Sure, thanks, Kent. And maybe I can just take a page from Natalie and say that the blog post that I really just felt compelled to draft early on here was I was having this deja vu of having been in the Obama administration in the middle of the worst financial crisis that we'd seen in a very long time since the Great Depression, and here we are in the midst of what appears to be really the worst economic crisis since the Great Depression, and maybe even beyond. We don't know yet, but I really felt compelled to talk about some of what I was feeling and seeing in the response, the governmental response today, compared to what we did during the Great Recession. And during the Great Recession, I really, the first lesson that I take away for today is that we simply did not do enough to keep people in their homes. And that's in their, the homes that they owned, and today in the homes that they rent, which is a little bit different than last time around. But we have so many people losing jobs, losing income, that it is critically important in that emergency phase, as Natalie talked about, to provide the kind of income support to those renters and homeowners to ensure that they can stay housed, and at the same time ensure that the lenders and the owners of those properties, if it's a rental property, can continue to pay their bills. And we have seen some great progress in that, in that first stimulus package, but there is more, in my view, on that emergency phase for housing that we need to be doing much more specifically, that we did not do, frankly, during the Great Recession. And part of the reason we didn't do it is because we did not collectively as a society quite understand how bad it would be when you unravel a system of market finance and keeping people, having people end up being foreclosed on, or and needing to start all over again. And that we can't repeat that mistake, I believe, this time around. So that's number one. Number two, again, riffing off Natalie, is we will recover from this economically. And we need to be doing things today that are putting in place the kinds of efforts that we're going to need to continue in housing production, for example. We are still going to need more people, more homes for our population, and we need to be working on those regulatory reforms to ensure that we keep the productivity going and accelerate it, so that when our economy is stronger, we're going to have in place the systems and the policies to ensure that we can get back to work and get back to building homes quickly.
Thank you, Carol. That's excellent. Chris, I know that the Joint Center for Housing Studies has kind of pushed back the state of your signature report, the State of the Nation's Housing Report, so you can focus on this pandemic. Related to what Carol was just talking about, obviously any suggestions you have, but in particular, there have been a number of stimulus packages that have passed. The real question is, what happens when the government subsidies run out?
Thanks, Ken. Yeah, the Joint Center is slated to put out our State of the Nation's Housing Report in June, and really at this point in time, I think we just felt there was no way to know, and we wanted to put it off until we have a chance to have a better sense of whether we're in that stabilization phase and what does it look for recovery. I think Carol's touched upon a lot of what we need to do, and certainly the unemployment extension, the benefits that are being extended to more people, longer period of time, will help and help supplement some of that income. I think when it runs out, those folks are in big trouble. The other thing is that I think we need to think about even if we find ways to keep people stable now in terms of having things like eviction moratorium, foreclosure moratorium, it doesn't relieve the debt. And so we have to think about what are going to be the loss mitigation tools for homeowners, what are going to be the ways in which we get assistance to renters to make sure that they stay housed. Carol put it well. I mean, when you think about someone not paying their rent, there's the impact on that household, but then there's the impact on that landlord. And those landlords, as much as we might want to think of them as large conglomerates, they're all a host of different landlords. And so we need to think about their financial health, and then beyond them, the financial system. So you're right, when the government subsidies stop, we're thinking about this as a 3-month crisis and not a 6-month, 12-month, 18-month crisis. We're going to need to think about both how do we extend to those who need it, and also how do we think about giving the people the resources they need to make up that deficit and recover. So I know there are a lot of people who are thinking about using existing funding channels. So we have things like housing vouchers that are administered by public housing authorities. We have the home program administered by states and localities. Those are good ways to get money into the system, but there's also going to be a whole host of people who are affected by this who were not previously eligible for assistance. Their incomes were too high before, but now affected. We estimate that there are about 4 million renters who are making more than 80% of AMI who are now suddenly going to be severely cost burdened as a result of this. And so there's going to be a need to expand that safety net as well.
Thank you very much, Chris. Lori, your expertise is housing finance, and I know that you're having a special webinar next week on the supply issues. I wonder if you could focus on finance for a minute, and especially as it relates to what happens when people can't pay their rent and if homeowners can't pay their mortgage.
Yes, well, it's very different for homeowners than for renters. If you're a homeowner with a mortgage backed by a federal entity, such as Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac, the FHA, Federal Housing Administration, the Veterans Administration, you're actually in pretty good shape. The CARES Act allows you to forbear your payments for 6 months with the option to extend the forbearance for another 6 months. The money must be repaid, as Chris mentioned, but the repayment plans range from paying the accumulated balance back over 5 years to moving it to the end as extra payments, depending on who backs your mortgage and your circumstances. We estimate that approximately 70% of homeowners have mortgages backed by these entities. If you have a mortgage that's in a bank portfolio or in a private label securitization, then the rules vary by entity. The issue on the mortgage side is even though the borrowers can get forbearance when it's needed on government mortgages, The servicers have to continue to make the payments to the security holders, even though they're not receiving the funds. Many of the independent mortgage bankers don't have the funds to continue to advance, even though they're going to eventually get paid back. Some sort of liquidity facility is going to be needed, or many mortgage bankers are going to go under, which is going to leave the system with insufficient capacity in the long run. The issues on the renter side are in many cases more severe. If a renter is in a building with a federal mortgage, they have 120 days of eviction protection, or if they're covered by some sort of a state or local eviction moratorium, then they've got eviction protection. However, eviction protection, as Chris mentioned, is not nearly the same as rental assistance. Many of those who have been laid off do have an extra $600 of unemployment insurance a week, which helps a great deal. It's greater than the base level of insurance for many people. However, there are a lot of others who fall through the cracks. And some workers that were supposed to benefit from the unemployment insurance expansion, such as gig economy workers and self-employed workers, have been unable to access these benefits that they're supposedly due in many states. There may well need to be some type of rental assistance program in the near term for these folks. Thank you.
Thank you, Lori. That's excellent. Appreciate that information. John, you've been writing about and working with housing and home building for a long time. What do you recommend for home builders now, both single family and multifamily?
Yeah, thank you, Kent. When I was listening earlier in the program to folks, it made me think that there are generations of knowledge in the community. There are generations that have been passed along in terms of what people know, in terms of how to deal with adversity, with great change, with emergencies. So at the same time, a moment like this is not necessarily so much about knowledge, it's about learning. And I think that the community is really at a point where learning is almost more important than what is known. So when we're dealing with a moment that's all about lives and livelihoods, putting priorities first, and I've seen the community respond extremely well to prioritizing health and safety in the community. And I think that goes across the board. The other thing I would just say, and I'll just be brief about it, which is that whether it's single family or multifamily, I think that the answers we see in the efforts of the winners in the Ivory Prize today have to do with the fact that there's no single player that's going to make changes here. It's an ecosystem. There are a lot of interdependencies, and understanding that it's a community that is going to solve the current problems, the current crisis, that will really sort of be key to the near term and the longer term planning for viability. So that's what I think about the response of the industry to now.
Thank you. And I just read the article you did for Builder Magazine, which talked about how important what we can learn from the top 10 finalists for the Ivory Prize are in this COVID-19 era. So thank you for that. Ryan, you're an expert related to industrialized construction. What impacts and solutions related to the construction of the homes do you have to share with us?
Thanks, Ken. It's no question that with construction sites shutting down in many of the states, and it's going across the United States, that this has significant impact on the companies that deliver housing, construction companies and trades, and the workers in particular, many of whom are not working currently. And this adversely impacts disproportionately smaller construction outfits. So the average size of a construction outfit or enterprise in the United States is 9 employees or less. And so the large majority of construction companies will be negatively impacted by this downturn. We've also heard from others on this call, on this panel, that economic depressions impact affordable housing development disproportionately. And so in the short term, this will be a challenge. There's no question about that this is going to be a challenge. And my heart goes out to all of my colleagues across the country who are currently experiencing this. And the downturn that we're also experiencing will be forthcoming. But what about the future, and how will COVID-19 impact for the future? Many have said that post-COVID-19, nothing will be the same. And I don't necessarily believe that. I think perhaps it will be more of the same, just accelerated. So what I mean is the same issues that design and construction has been experiencing before the pandemic, by way of labor shortage, increasing prices, the culling of companies, as well as consolidation of companies in construction, will probably occur at an increased rate. COVID-19 is just making construction industry future happen faster. And unfortunately, this acceleration due to the crisis will accelerate the housing crisis as well. Fortunately, however, I think that innovation, invention will respond to this housing crisis post-COVID-19 and will industrialize methods of construction, the area that I look a lot at. Things like vertical integration of companies, partnerships along the supply chain, greater data gathering and management, and a flight to quality and healthy buildings, as well as more development of standards across the industry to make it more competitive. So I think those are some things that we'll see in the future post-COVID-19.
I think all of you who are on the broadcast today can see what a great panel that we have in terms of the advisory board. We're now going to impose a 1-minute rule. We've got some questions, but we're going to ask you to just sort of focus in a short period. Chris, I'm going to ask you first. Clark already got into this a little bit when he was talking to the winners of the new Outstanding Public Achievement Award related to the zoning changes in the city of Minneapolis and Oregon. And the question, and Clark began it, but maybe you can wrap it up. They gave some answers, but how in the world did these two, one city, one state, do it when so many others have tried and have not been successful in implementing these kinds of changes?
Well, you know, maybe with a little bit of prescience, last fall when we had an event at Harvard celebrating last year's Ivory Prize winners, we actually had Minneapolis and Oregon with us, and we asked them this question. And so what's interesting is the two of them answered that question quite similarly. And it starts with a question about framing the issue as well as community engagement. You know, and Minneapolis in particular, but Oregon as well, really framed this as a question about racial justice and racial equality and issues about racial disparities over time and needing to overcome that. There's also issues around climate change and resiliency, issues around responding to sprawl, in Oregon responding to mansionization. And so in both places, there really was a real effort to make sure that people understood how this approach related to the fundamental issues that people were dealing with. And I will say, I think that the way in which the housing affordability issue has become so endemic and affects so many people broaden the appeal for this issue. So it started with really community engagement and framing the issue. Secondly, a key important part in both places has been strong political leadership. In Minneapolis, the head of the city council, the mayor were strong champions for this. In the folks today mentioned Tina Kotek, the House Speaker in Oregon, was a strong leader of this. She had strong support from the governor and in the Senate as well. So strong political leadership. And then last, really strong advocacy community. And so you had the 1,000 Friends of Oregon today, you had Minnesota neighbor to neighbor. So I think you need all that. You need framing, community engagement, and education. You need strong political leadership. And lastly, you need to have strong advocacy. And with that, both of them put through what seemed like a very difficult proposition, but passed quite overwhelmingly, and so far has been embraced.
And on this one, I want to echo what Clark said. I think that with COVID-19, the roles of state and local government as we go forward in terms of changing and removing some of the regulatory barriers will be key to our success in getting out of this pandemic crisis. Ryan, real quickly, one of the questions was, what is the most significant change in the housing industry that you see coming in the next 20 years? Can you give us the 30-second version of that?
Sure. I think the next 20 years will look much like perhaps Japan and Sweden's housing industry in the past 20 years. So if we look to our future and what they've gone through, they're much more mature housing industry, especially on the industrialized construction front, I would say. And what that looks like is fewer companies delivering greater portion of the housing solutions in cooperation with government, as we've heard in the last comment. So the next 20 years, therefore, perhaps will look also much like the car industry in the past 20 years. Consolidation, integration, vertical alignment as a function of economic necessity, the need for energy efficiency and gains in productivity. That's what I see in the future.
That would be fun to have a lot of discussion on, but we'll move on. Let's go to you, Natalie. Before COVID-19, I know that Utah felt they had a housing affordability crisis. With the pandemic, what's going to happen now with respect to Utah and housing affordability?
COVID-19 is not a short-term problem. I believe it's a new risk that we have to manage. And there's a lot going on both the supply side and the demand side. I expect the economic disruption will send many suppliers and buyers and sellers to the sidelines. Construction and rentals will all be impacted. In Utah, I expect fewer building permits to be issued, perhaps as many as 25 to 30% less. I think Utah's housing shortage will remain, but we will have less new supply and lower demand because of the crisis. And so the way I look at it is all of this just makes the innovation celebrated by the Ivory Prize all the more important as we try to create value in this risky environment.
Thank you. Lori, real question for you. How hard is it going to be for people to get a mortgage after COVID-19?
It's already gotten much more difficult to get a mortgage in the wake of the pandemic. Even for loans that can be sold to Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac, or the Federal Housing Administration, many lenders are increasing the credit score that's required, increasing the down payment that's required, or decreasing the allowable debt-to-income ratio, and in some cases requiring reserves. They're trying to use existing available resources to service existing customers that want to do a refinancing. In addition, they're concerned that if someone gets laid off quickly, they're going to be in a position of having to either make best case, make the payments the borrowers would have made only to get paid back much later, or worst case, buy the loan back. And for many self-employed borrowers and those that rely on bank statements, the situation is even worse. The non-agency market has largely shut down. If a lender makes a loan to a self-employed borrower relying on a bank statement, 8 weeks ago he could have sold the loan he made at a price of 100 at 103. Now he'll take a loss on the loan and he won't make it at all. I expect the very tight credit conditions that prevail now will ease up in the next few months, but it'll remain much, much tighter than before this pandemic. Jobs have disappeared for good, and some of those that remain will pay less. Home prices are apt to be down, and lenders are apt to be much more wary to lend under a situation of declining home prices, at least in the short run.
I wish you had better news for us, but I think it's also important to be realistic. Carol, I'm going to ask you one, and obviously I know you could take 2 hours on this, but what do you think is going to happen in the housing market for the remainder of this year and beyond?
So I'm going to be very brief, and I want to just say, I think gave the answer, which is this is an unprecedented situation. We can, prognosticate about what's going to happen, but I don't think we really know, how deep, how difficult, how bad this is going to be for housing markets. I think we really just don't know all the implications. I think what we do know is that unless we're very intentional in our policy about this, that we will exacerbate what is already an unequal access and unequal opportunity in this country for people in lower wage jobs. And, that is just going to be much, much worse unless we, really put some intentional floor underneath that situation. Because, those of us who are sitting in our living rooms or offices in our homes who have stable jobs, you will be fine. But there are so many more who don't have that stability. And this recovery is obviously going to be much, much more difficult for them unless we, are much more intentional than we have been so far.
Thank you, Carol. And John, you've spent years at Hanley Wood thinking about innovation as it relates to housing. Out of this crisis, are there opportunities related to innovation that we can look forward to?
Absolutely, and I think Ryan expressed it somewhat by saying that the futures move faster toward us. I think the disposition and the DNA of the people in the community, as I said before, is as problem solvers, and I think that one of the winners expressed that there's really nothing impossible when it comes to looking at a problem and using the combination of the soul and the character of people, and then technology and data that can be brought to it these days. So I really think that even though, as Carol says, the vulnerable are really, we haven't even begun to understand the impact on the vulnerable populations of a little further downstream, but it's going to become a real phenomenon, and innovation is going to be a necessity versus an option at this point.
Thank you so much. Now, our time is basically up, but I'm going to ask the panel one last question and give them a 20-second response. You've worked on the Ivory Prize now. Give me one observation or lesson that you've learned from your perspective from having the opportunity to be a part of the Ivory Prize process. Please, let's just go ahead and Carol, why don't you start?
Sure. Well, I would just say it's been incredibly educational for me, given and inspiring, being able to peek into all of these incredibly innovative companies. But I think the thing that has struck me the most, particularly given COVID-19, is the ability of these entrepreneurs to pivot their business models, or just be nimble in how they are responding to the current situation that is also putting them in a good position to continue to innovate for the future.
Thank you. Natalie.
Kent, I'm going to go with the importance of compliance over enforcement, emphasizing compliance. There's an old adage that you should, in public policy, make it easy for people to do the right things. And when I was, checking out what Symbian had done with the computational law platform and helping to speed up the permitting of ADUs, or Rhino helping people with their security deposits, I could just feel that what we're trying to do is help people to do the right thing through our tools and our innovations. And I think that's something that was very evident in all of the finalists.
Thank you. Lori.
Yes, so I spend most of my time on housing finance, and I've just been struck by the creativity of the applicants, the thoughtfulness of the solutions, and the wide range of issues they are addressing. So, for example, if you look at the top 10 in the finance category, it just included everything to help renters build savings, to Rhino the Winner, which helps people with their security deposits, to a platform to help renters use their rental payments toward their credit score, a nonprofit that helps resident-owned manufactured home communities. All of these entrants help lower the cost or increase the availability of housing for homeowners or renters, and the creativity of the applicants has just been incredible and a real pleasure.
Thank you very much. Chris, please.
Well, I think my advisory panel members have said it, but I think one thing that's just been amazing is to be able to see the range of creativity and energy that's out there. America really is an entrepreneurial country, and I think when you work in the housing space, you can get dismayed by the affordability issue that's been pernicious and lasting. But I think that this being part of the Ivory Prize has given me hope that, in fact, with this incredible display of entrepreneurial zeal across the spectrum from businesses to the cities and state of Minneapolis and Oregon, there's hope. We say sometimes we're looking for a silver bullet solution, and the housing system is so intertwined and so complex. What we really need is a silver buckshot solution. Clark Ivory, through the prize, has helped to elevate these ideas. I love hearing Jerry McCaffrey talking about the fact that he would love to see his approach adopted by more firms. Like Rhino would love to see their model adopted. So I think through the Ivory Prize and through the work of the advisory panel, I hope these ideas get disseminated and expanded, because we certainly need it. And it's been a pleasure to be part of it.
Thank you. John.
Yeah, I've been astounded by the impact of particularly the young, fresh minds that have been taking on some of the problems that have been impediments, that have been challenges to people who have a lot of wisdom and a lot of experience. But these younger folks that have come into this community have really signaled a pivot to what could happen differently and boldly, and really solving problems that we never could have imagined. So I just really am grateful for what the Ivory Prize is doing.
Great, thank you. And Ryan, last but not least.
Yeah, I think in this, what I've been observed and really heartened by is that innovation really happens at the overlap of the different categories: policy, finance, design, and construction, as those things come together to solve a problem. And so just on behalf of the panel, thanks Kent and to Clark for involving us, and thanks to all the companies who submitted.
That's great. And my observation is when we started this, when Clark started it 2 years ago, it was very important. Now with COVID-19, innovation, technology, and solutions are even more important. And housing will be very much a part of leading to the recovery, which will happen. Thank you.
That's great, Kent. And I just want to thank everyone who's been in our audience today. I also want to thank our panelists. Truthfully, I am very optimistic, and that's the way to be. This is the spring of hope. We need to be more optimistic than ever before. When we focus on solutions and not just the challenges, we do so much better. Let's all go out and be innovators. Let's all go out and be those that drive for solutions and don't focus entirely on the challenges, but move forward as a spring of hope. It awaits. That's it. Let's go.